Dear all, after the amazing start with the topic of patient centricity today, we are continuing with the topic of patient advocacy. So I would like to give the word to Ghada Ibrahim, who is a medical entomologist by training, but separately she is a patient advocate at Atelier and also a member of Swiss nonprofit association Patient Advocates for Cancer Research and Treatment. Ghada, the word is yours, and I will assist with sharing your slides.
Hello? Oh God, no.
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, but
I'm sorry, something's wrong with my mouse. I'm awfully sorry. I'm going to try to get onto. Okay, I will. Can you see me at least? No?
No, we were seeing you
Okay.
perfectly a few minutes ago. No
No,
worries.
something's wrong with my mouse. So I'm going to have to just play it by ear. Can you put the slides on, and I will try to follow along. Thank you so much, Gurgan. Okay, yes. So thank you so much for having me, and thank you for including this session on patient advocacy. And thank you, Boriana, for this lovely presentation from Janssen. And of course, I look forward to looking into it deeper and asking you actually quite a few questions at the end. I'm going to just lay some groundwork for the amazing contributors that are going to follow me today, but I'll start with the concept and value of patient advocacy. Gurgana chose the title, and I didn't argue because I actually think it's wonderful. So next slide, please. Advocacy again. We're going to go back a step, not going to patient advocacy as yet, but I'd like to simply refer to the root of the word, which is to summon and to voice and to call to. And this is actually just evokes the image of calling people by your side to support in some way. It is an active, even verbal support, but somehow it's quite distinct from activism, because even though it involves public action, the priority is making your voice heard. So if you deem something important enough to demand that you have a voice, so you can be an advocate. Next slide, please. So what does it really mean? Is it a word we fully understand? Because somehow I question that. Is it really a word we fully understand, or does it still remain quite abstract, non-tangible? Is there a term that perfectly translates into every language or nuance in every culture? So I know I'm Egyptian, Swiss. I know I speak English, French, and Arabic, and still can't get it right. So in Arabic, for example, a language spoken in 25 countries with nearly 500 million people, if not more, we still haven't gotten a term to stick. Not that we're not working on finding a term, but because it's really, really difficult. So we realize that some terms may even get you into a lot of trouble, politically and in other ways, but it can set you back a few years. If you don't have the proper term, you can get into trouble. So even if we do get it right, are we all referring to the same thing? Next slide, please. Now, if we go into the particular case of patient advocates and patient advocacy, when we think about it, we automatically relate it to somehow according to where we stand personally. So what are we advocating? Are we advocating, directing research somewhere or the other, or could it be something really particular in as niche as access to medicine, a very complicated topic, or could it be even more of a societal concern, like organizing rallies or even broadening public education awareness, or having a say in treatment and care modalities? Or do we go further and go into governance and mobilize voters, or engage in lobbying, or even extreme cases of litigation, for example. So it really all depends on what the objective is and how focused are we, or how comprehensive our vision is, or whether we're talking it from an individual personal standpoint, or do we have a larger view for the public and society at large. And at the very end, I'd like to also ask, who are we addressing? Because it's quite confusing where we stand and who are we addressing. It's not the same thing everywhere along the lines. So next slide, please. But one thing is for certain, and that we've seen throughout patient advocates, and there are certain traits that are quite common. Even a patient can be a patient advocate for sure, yes, but a patient advocate doesn't have to be a patient. So quite a few perspectives, but there's always cause for motivation. There's a cause or a purpose with specific objectives. All patient advocates are inspired and committed, and they love to collaborate. They love to collaborate, to share and connect. They also seek a level of awareness. They seek, they are hungry for awareness, actually. They like to be as aware as possible. And so in that, they seek a certain level of education. And I put that in quotation marks because we will talk about that later. And through education, they become empowered. And when I say they, I mean we and me and I. So being empowered gives you leverage to become more eloquent, more articulate, to be able to articulate a narrative that is important for meaningful dialogue. So next slide, please. The next slide actually says the value of patient advocacy and meaningful contribution through meaningful exchange. And again, I put the word meaningful in quotation marks because it's a word that is used consciously now when talking about patient contribution in clinical research. The patient, caregiver, and equally importantly, care providers, such as the nursing staff, for example, they form a part of a relevant community and their respective society, meaning both their direct community, but also the society in which they relate to. So, for example, sharing a disease or condition everywhere in the world. This is a society as well. But one thing is also for sure that we offer a wealth of immeasurable information, and we know it. And in the past decade, this has been increasingly recognized and acknowledged. So the utility in including these voices in every step of the care continuum, whenever it is deemed necessary, is being currently evaluated rigorously in the healthcare structures. However, reciprocally, this contribution has to be rewarded with some kind of speeding up of innovation that is relevant to outcomes that matter to the patients and the public at large. So like I was saying earlier, everyone has a certain mission from where you stand. Of course, we would love it to be comprehensive, but if I were to maybe put my mission in a few words, it is that I advocate for patient-public involvement in clinical research and beyond. So next slide, please. Because I believe in the positive contribution of patient advocacy. And I hope that all of us here do too. We have talked about patient centricity, which is the patient, of course, is the common denominator to all the stakeholders. But the patient also has certain things that he'd like to see, or she would like to see, certainly like to see patient centricity, and would also like to be called to or share with their own perspective. We would love it to be comprehensive, personalized, as we've seen in the previous talks, and of course, evidence-based. And I would like to see it done through meaningful contribution and engagement. We would like to see it in every part of the continuum. And if I can see the next slide, please, I'll explain a little more. Where do we see the largest impact of patient-public involvement in the care continuum? Everywhere. We know it's valuable. We know that it's valuable in prevention. For example, in identifying, unmet needs, medical needs. We know it's important in diagnostics, for detection, therapy, treatment, we have a say, of course, care, we are directly implicated. And of course, aftercare, rehabilitation, and prevention in case, for example, of metastasis, where we've seen patients who are clear when we talk about cancer research, and then totally forget that there could be or should be follow-up. So we know that it's valuable. But is the impact the same all around? Or do we need to kind of evaluate the contribution and the impact? And I can also, if I have the next slide, also relate that to whether there's importance of PPI or patient public involvement in the life cycle of medicines. And again, yes, of course. How much is another question, but whether it's important, yes, it is. So again, for discovery, all the way from the very beginning, discovery, clinical development, regulatory reviews. So for example, sitting on regulatory bodies, the patient contribution on ethical committees. It cannot be, it's a question long gone. For pricing and reimbursement even, you may not think so, but or patients in general may not think they have a say, but definitely there is. And we'll see, Barbara will definitely corroborate that. And all the way up to, of course, pharmacovigilance, which patient-reported outcomes will have a major say. Next slide, please. So the importance is to have a dialogue, of course. We need to have this patient advocates, patient stakeholder exchange. What is the value of patient involvement for stakeholders? And what is the value of the stakeholder involvement for the patients? It's an equilibrium that we need to reach. So for the patient, we know we need to question medical need identification. And this is something we can definitely work together with the stakeholders. We challenge assumptions. That's what we're there for. We challenge the assumptions, and that is what pushes innovation forward. We are actually quite organized, and that should be also seized upon. So we're organized. We have cohorts. We believe in registries, and we believe in data. We can also help with identifying sites where specific conditions are present all over the world. And we can garner support all over the world. And we have our own data. We have ownership of our own data. And we also are ready to share. This is, of course, a thorn that is now in the side of all researchers. But yes, ownership of our own data and whether we are ready to share it. And how ready are we to share, and what are we ready to share? All of these questions actually empower a patient to be able to help the other stakeholders move forward, which is a win-win situation. Eventually, data is wealth, and all stakeholders know this. Again, the value of the stakeholder for the patient, enormous. We just saw the Janssen videos, enormous involvement for the patient, enormous help. The video was quite enlightening and incredibly informative. Patients are there to help focus the development, help solve questions of who to involve and how to involve, and answer questions on or push for diversity and inclusion, push for forming venues and platforms for education and patient knowledge and health literacy. These are all co-creation of work together. And the enormous benefit in clinical trial design, for example. We know that clinical trials sometimes fail because recruitment can happen, but retention is very difficult. Consent forms, and Pierella mentioned that there is no silver bullet for consent forms. Totally agree. So we need to review consent forms together with the decision makers and people who are involved in writing them up. Next slide, please. So as an advocate, I mentioned before education in quotation quite a number of times, because I firmly believe that patient education is key. I'd like to just refer to one of the examples, also talked about in yesterday's panel by IMI's Pierre Mullen, and where he talked about UPATI. I'm a member of the Swiss platform for UPATI, and this is the European Patients Academy for Therapeutic Innovation. I hope everybody knows about it because I joined early on, quite many years ago, and I've seen it grow, and I've seen how vital it is as an education platform for meaningful patient engagement. They have a great training program, incredibly detailed. It's very informative. I urge you to all have a look at it and join. They have an online toolbox that took years to develop. They have national platforms around Europe, but they also recently extended beyond Europe into Japan. And so Japan has adopted EUPATI as a national platform, mainly because probably, and I venture a guess, is because the regulations are very similar. They have also created the EUPATI Fellows program, which is an accredited type program, and I find it to be an indispensable base for meaningful patient engagement. Next slide, please. The EUPATI actually example gets me talking about another mindset, which is where I live, the Swiss National Fund, Science Fund, for example, which is the largest funding agency for non-pharma. And it is, in 2018, it started putting patient-public involvement as an important criterion when evaluating funding for investigator-initiated clinical trials. And in 2020, this December, actually, last December, the call for proposals that started and is now in the first cycle, maybe the second cycle now, has a specific evaluation criteria which includes documentation of PPI. And when we were talking about earlier on in the session with Charlene about checking a box, it is becoming increasingly not just a checkbox. It is very important to involve patient, caregiver, nursing staff, everybody whose perspective may influence the study design early on in the study design stage. And they actually were very clear to say that if this is not well represented, it will not go through. But what does that really mean? So what happens is now that we are trying to evaluate the impact that patient-public involvement in clinical research really means. So international guidelines are being developed to enhance the quality of PPI reporting, to strengthen the future of PPI evidence base, and to enable stakeholders to understand the impact or difference that PPI can make to research. But there's still a need to develop quantitative tools to measure this impact. And this is why it has moved not just from a checkbox, but a real creation of guidelines that we can follow and question and challenge maybe in the future. Next slide, please. So in the coming few presentations, we're going to be talking quite a bit about global patient advocacy. So I won't go into it except to say that I am a very proud member of Inspire to Live. I'm a very proud member for many years, but I'm also a very proud member of Inspire to Live's newly founded World Campus, which has hubs now after one year on, representing over 40 countries, and it's quite diverse. It includes patients, of course, patient advocates, caregivers, all the stakeholders that we mentioned, data scientists, etc. And our real mission is literally to collaborate and to share and to connect and to learn from each other and maybe emulate. One of the projects, of course, of having advocacy around the world, and the video earlier on said it very clearly, is to building a future of health equity. So next slide, please. What are the challenges of building this patient advocacy around the world? Again, we go back to the language and the culture. These are some of the major challenges that we have to face and answer and tackle. low and middle income countries do not have the same priorities, do not have the same healthcare landscape, do not have the same policies and regulations. They're quite distinct. And so understanding the context and the landscape of a given country is incredibly important. We may think that language is not important, but it can actually be a barrier. So can something like the Upati platform be emulated in other countries? I believe so. I'm actually trying to push for that because we have so much in common and very little differences, and we can surely develop it to a country context. So one of the challenges that we see, some of the challenges that we see are, of course, due to data, privacy, collection, reporting. All of these are touchy subjects, but subjects that need to be tackled. And the one challenge that I see as one of the biggest ones is silos. Whereas here in Europe, we have been trying to break them down for in the past decade, and we're being very successful at that. We're connecting, we're sharing, we're understanding. But I hope that in other parts of the world, we can hit the ground running and not build silos to begin with. And I end here with just a quote from Erin Brockovich. I'm an advocate for awareness, the truth, and a person's right to know. I believe that in the absence of truth, all of us stand helpless to defend ourselves, our families, and our health, which is the greatest gift we have. So thank you.
Thank you, Ghada, for the amazing talk. It was really helpful to have this presentation first and to learn more about patient advocacy value and the idea of this mission, as Peter and you said earlier. And having said this, patient advocacy, it is a mission, but is it a mission? It's possible in low and middle income countries, and how can we improve this?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
It is a mission, and we're up to the challenge. We have all it takes to, again, I say, emulate, learn from what has been done, and capitalize on what is being done. And actually, this is a question that I had for Boriana earlier. Is that I didn't really catch in her talk whether this. The Janssen video actually exists in other languages, especially in my case with Arabic. Again, these 25 countries. I'm sure they do, but I just needed to hear it from her. But definitely the mission has its own particular and inherent challenges, and we're up to the challenge, and because we believe in the mission.
Thank you. A really nice answer, and I would like to hear this one, because being from Bulgaria, we do meet almost all of the challenges that were on the slide, but since it's a mission, there must be a solution for all these challenges and problems we are facing.